Sit, stay.
You're on.
So, my name's Richard Phillips. First of all, I'm really happy to be here, right? What y'all are doing is good and important, right? And I strongly believe that. And so, by mere circumstance, Shonda contacted me, and Shonda was like, okay, Richard, we're looking for Tim Lewis, who had done some spotted turtle work. And I said, Shonda, it just so happens that we're doing some spotted turtle work. And she said, well, would you be willing to speak? And I'm like, heck yeah. And then I got to meet with the folks, and we've been looking at various wetlands. And so what I'm gonna talk to you about today is a little bit about how we've been sampling for spotted turtles in southwestern Ohio, and then what we plan to do here over the summer. And when I say we, it's myself and 3 undergraduate students that will be working on summer research projects with me, okay? Don't be frightened. These are not to scale, okay? And so, who knows male or female? Yes. Okay, that's fine. It'll move along much more quickly if y'all are quicker with your answers, right? But this is a female. Spotted turtles are morphologically different, more specifically based on color. The females have brightly colored chins, and the males have more base black colored skin, right? And so, interesting little facet of spotted turtle biology. I hope that's interesting, because otherwise this is going to be a long talk. Okay, so what you're looking at here is a spotted turtle with a radio telemetry piece in it. Now, that's not what we're talking about doing here with Beaver Creek Wetlands this year, okay? And so this is it crossing a fin. You'll see that it's also got marks on the shell. We did that because then if a member of the public finds it, takes a photo of it, it can play a role in estimating that population. Okay, and I'll walk you through sort of what it is that we're doing. But this one's got a radio transmitter on it, which means we can follow it around. I'll give you first just a little bit of background on spotted turtles, okay? Are you excited if you're a biologist or if you're a person and you find a small turtle? Yes, 1, because that's a damn difficult thing to do, right? But 2, that means they're reproducing, right? And that's what we want, spotted turtle populations that are reproducing. It's not all good news though, right? So they've got a lot of variation in clutch size from 1 to 8. Here we'll typically see 3 or 4, okay? 48 to 100% hatch, and the variation in this is phenomenal, right? You've heard the saying, don't put all your eggs in one basket? Yeah. These things put all their eggs in one basket, okay? But so the idea here is, I'm giving you a range, but recognize that it could be 0 for any particular turtle. And if you're talking about populations that are really small, you could see that be 0 for the population, okay? What are we blaming? We've lost all the apex predators. And as a consequence of that, those middle carnivores, things like skunks and possums and raccoons, all of those things that would love to eat a turtle egg or munch on a baby turtle have become much more common, okay? Okay, but that's just part of it, right? We'll get through that. Young that's a pretty high survival rate, and these things can be really tough to track over time. And so, to me, right, it's highly variable as well. I think that's probably an overestimate for what we'd be looking at in pens, okay? So, the little ones, now we go to the big ones, right? Male or female? Yeah, I can't really tell on that one, but it looks like it's right. But the point here is adults between 7 to 10 years old, okay? So it takes that little turtle 7 to 10 years to play a role reproductively in that population. Typically, the males reach reproductive maturity before the females. Females are typically a little bit larger than males. Anybody want to guess why the females would be larger than males? They've got to hold the eggs. Look at that. Great crowd, I should have known. Okay, so the idea here is, this is the male survival rate, about 94.2%, and females about 96.5%. Right, and recognize that I'm not giving y'all pluses and minuses, and that's a little bit dishonest on my part. There's variation in all of these estimates. But I want you to think about that for 1 second when we start talking about this. What you're looking at here in the map is the distribution of spotted turtles in North America, okay? You'll notice that there's very clearly a East Coast population and a Midwest population. In late fall of last year, people from all along the eastern seaboard got together and came up with a conservation plan for the spotted turtle. They also utilized a sampling protocol that we'll come back to here. So you'll notice we put this as being ubiquitous, right? So that's a big solid swath. And we know in reality on the landscape, they aren't found in all habitats, right? So that's important to recognize and something that we'll come back to. So what has started to happen is we're starting to look at this sort of Midwestern population to get a better idea of what's going on. Now, eggs, we talked about those mesocarnivores. Young, we talked about those mesocarnivores. Remember what the adult survival rate was? 96%, right? 96%. So what do you think happens when somebody picks one up and sells it on the pet trade? You can love something to death, right? And so one of the things that's really struggling in terms of conservation, we want to get it out, we want to get people involved, but these things are sporadic and when you can find them, right? And can absolutely be devastated at a local population level by collection for the pet trade, right? Catastrophic. Right? And so in addition to doing scoop marks, what we will do is we'll put a microchip in, like what you have with a domestic dog that gives it ownership. That's a legally defensible marking for the animal, whereas a scoop mark isn't. But it's also a permanent means of being able to track that animal. Okay? We're also concerned with vehicle strikes. That's certainly, we've got an aquatic turtle that spends a good deal of time on land, right? They'll spend some time on land. Now here's Ohio, and this is 2004, right? And what you're looking at here is a map of where they were finding them, right? So we've got a swath up in northern Ohio, and then this little group through here, right? And so we find them typically with bogs and fens, and down here it's primarily fens, right? Although we call some of them bogs, but they're shallow water specialists. Now look at this. If you have an interest in herpetology in the state of Ohio, you have to get these books, Reptiles of Ohio and Amphibians of Ohio. There's not a better state guide out there for any other state. Ohio Biological Survey sells those. They're 2-volume sets and they are phenomenal. But so my question becomes this. Here's our key. Empty circles mean before 1952, 1952 to 1989, and then after 1989. And what I want you to look at is look at what's happening here in southwestern Ohio. Since 1989, those are the locations where we've documented spotted turtles. And so that's where we started surveying, okay? And so do you think there's anything else that would be concerned with these isolated, disjunct populations? Okay, well, this one's on me, right? Because nobody got it, that's on me, okay? And so what I'm suggesting is that when you isolate those populations, what may be sustainable if they can be moved among populations is no longer sustainable. Losing 10 adults, right, is probably not going to be sustainable. But losing 3, if you have immigration or movement into a population, that may help sustain it. Where do y'all think I'm going with this? What y'all are doing is great, right? Because if you look for places where wetlands are linked together, like y'all are trying to do, it's nowhere else. And so when I was in high school and had no idea where Springfield or Dayton were on the map, I knew, whatever. But the idea here is, thank you. Because I have an opportunity to look at these things in relatively contiguous habitats. And so that's going to be something that's really interesting here, okay? So, tracking turtles. What we're after is two things. One is the distribution piece. Where are they, right? And so for doing that, we do two basic things. Visual assessment surveys, we just go out and look for turtles, right? We put a 20-minute time limit on it. We use binoculars. We look for areas where we think they will be, right? Along with that, we do hoop traps, and I'll show you pictures of these hoop traps in a second. But basically what you do is you put a trap out there that captures that turtle. You check it every day for 4 nights, right? And then you monitor what you get and release it. More intensive, more harmful to the wetland, right? Because wetlands aren't just spotted turtles, right? We've got photos of all the diversity they contain. So we can't not consider that. Right? And then we're also interested in that presence-absence piece. Are they here or are they not? And that's really where we are right now for Beaver Creek Wetland Association. We're going to try to get out there this summer and decide, are they there or are they not? We also are trying to get an idea of population index, which is just kind of more than or less than here, or more this year than last year. But we're also trying to get a population estimate. We're working at 2 Clark County fins right now, utilizing these population estimate techniques. We don't know what a healthy population really looks like at these fins, and so that's what we're trying to find out, okay? But that, again, the Beaver Creek stuff would be the presence absence initially, okay? So, here's that map. After 1989, right? And so what we're going to try to do is get to a ton of sites, okay? Does anybody see the spotted turtle in that photograph?
Yeah.
Okay, well, you can just say yes, right, and not really see the turtle. I deal with 18 to 22-year-olds, right? We're all 18 to 22 in our heads, right? So where's the turtle? Bottom right, that's correct, right? Bottom right. We never got that turtle. We trapped for multiple years at a site and still didn't get all the turtles. And that's a very big spotted turtle. You don't know the log, and I didn't put anything in there for reference, but we get better, right, as we see these things. But the idea here is they can be tough to spot. So if I'm out there trying to figure out if they're present or if they're not present, I've got to at some point start thinking about if they're there and I'm just not seeing them. Everybody follow me? Everybody sees them in March, right? And they're active in March, but they're also active through June. What changes at the fin?
Green.
Yes, the vegetation obstructs it. And so some things we see, right? That wasn't an effective segue, but here we go. Do y'all see the turtle in this one? Okay, I have no idea if there's a turtle. But my point is that if there was, you would be responsible for seeing it. Okay? Now what you do see is a Promar trap. Those are the funnel traps that we use, and what they are like is a minnow trap. I don't know if y'all have worked with these or not, but they've got a net funnel that they go into, and then they can't find their way out, okay? And that's how we would capture them, okay? And so what we've been doing is I don't want to just keep trapping at a place if they're not there because I'm hurting other things. Everybody follow me? Traffic impacts fins. So what we're doing is we did 3 or 6 sites last summer, okay? And they're covering up the black ones that we had sightings in. And what we saw was this. We had 3 sites that we didn't know if we had turtles or not. There have been sightings, okay? and not super recent. So we did a 4-night trap stint, which is exactly what I'm proposing for the wetlands here, okay? 1 of 3 sites had a turtle detected. Now, if we look at when those turtles were last sighted, it lines well. In Ross County, they had a sighting in 2011, I think, and we picked it up, and for a while we thought it was the same turtle. It wasn't, right? But we thought it was, okay? 3 sites, we did 3 trap sessions each. Okay, so 4 nights, let it rest for a couple of weeks, 4 nights, let it rest for a couple of weeks, 4 nights. We call this demographic assessment. But it also gives us an idea of how likely we are to pick it up if we know they're there. Everybody follow me here? So we go out to sites, 2 of 2 sites that we knew about. We've got no estimate of density on these things, right? So we don't have that piece. But what we do have is at one site we knew there were turtles out there. We had radio telemetry on them. We caught them 3 out of 3 of those 4 trap night sessions. Everybody follow me there? At one site, we had 2 of 3 trap sessions. This is a collaborative effort with a lot of folks, and the first trapping session was probably not our best. I had let people go out there that I thought were a little bit better at trap placement. That's on me, right? But what it does do, I'm doing a lot on me. That may not be super smart, but I'm just saying. Okay, so the idea here is I need to make sure, right, that we keep collecting these data, because what we don't want to do is be 80% sure that we would find turtles if they're there, and to keep going into that wetland repeatedly. Everybody follow me there? And so our goal, right, is to go through, that's the wrong button. So again, Dimitri, Lily, and there's a turtle in that one too. I'm not gonna, that's not really what I'd like to see, them holding the turtle up, but they're undergraduates and they have a passion for this and so. But the idea here is we're gonna scout reference points. In other words, I've been out with several of the great folks here to check out places, and we've scouted. I wanna do a 4-night trap session at 4 to 5 sites to see what we get, right? We'll do presence, absence initially, but we're also gonna couple that with visual encounter surveys. Why? Because if you can just go look for them for 20 minutes and not have to put nets and sardines out there, that's a better way to do that, right? And so, the trapping piece, right? There is that funnel trap. And what you can see is the funnel comes here, right? And then another comes here. And what you want to do is we'll put these in particular spots in the fin. We're not trying to get an unbiased sample. We're trying to get where we think the turtles are, right? We're really focusing in on those habitats that we think would be good. But that's what the trap set would look like. And so here's what we're thinking. Yes, sir?
Do turtles have runways? Or certain pathways
yes.
they tend to walk through?
We think that they like clearer pathways. Maybe some of you have seen them, and a lot of times they'll walk along boardwalks, like the sideboards on those boardwalks. We've also known them to utilize the area underneath the boardwalk. No vegetation, protected from predators. It's kind of like a highway. So yes, sir, we think that that's the case. All right. We'll be going in May and June. We're thinking Pearl's Fin, Bierman Fin, the Biodiversity Reserve, Siebenthaler, and Zimmerman. So we're getting a pretty good representation of your greenway there, right? And so our hope is that we're gonna get some hits. That may not have been, that we're gonna get some places where we have turtles, right? That's, so, where might we go, right? And again, It's a privilege. We're just starting this working relationship, but there's nothing about this that doesn't make me fired up, right, in a good way, and to have students get involved with this. But expanded trapping, maybe there's some more fence that we think would be good places that would harbor spotted turtles. We may want to do some demographic surveys if we get some hits in Siebenthaler or wherever. We could also look at known populations. So can we start thinking about, do we want to get into population estimates, right? Okay, we've got them at Siebenthaler. How many do we have, right? We could look at examine spatial use and habitat preference and camera traps. And one of the things that we're doing here is, these are really nice because they are quasi-replicates. And replicates are, if I've got multiple fins, they're all unique, right? Don't get me wrong, but in terms of, it's about as close as it gets for replication in ecological studies. And so we've been doing studies, long-term studies at 2 fins in Clark County, and the ability to maybe look at movement in connected areas versus more isolated areas might be something that would be of merit, right? And so, again, not trying to get ahead of myself here, but I think it's a mistake not to think about those next steps. Okay, so acknowledgements, right? Beaver Creek Wetlands Association, Shanda, Beth, right? All of them are great, and I really appreciate the time I was able to spend in the field with Jim and Dave. That was fundamental. I knew that, you know, this was going to be a place that would be aligned well with what I like to do, right? Which is super important, I guess. But anyway, the idea is lots of people, right? Ohio Department of Natural Areas and Preserves, Department of Natural Resources, Division of Wildlife, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. We've got a grant for doing this with Toledo Zoo and Ohio State and Michigan State and Purdue. And so we're really working through this on a large scale level in hopes of trying to come up with a way to save these things. And so with that, I'm happy to entertain any questions or just leave y'all alone.
So each one you're trapping, are you actually chipping them and keeping track of them that way?
Yes, sir. So the question was every turtle that we capture, do we microchip? And the answer to that is yes. We didn't microchip the little one, right? We'll typically go 40 grams-ish, right? And I'll do the small ones, right? Mm-hmm.
So in May and June when they're out, what is the best time of day to see them?
So the question was, in May and June when they're out, when's the best time to see them? You know, May, this time in May, you're probably gonna be talking about maybe cooler days, right? They kind of like those cooler temperatures. And then June. But the problem is, the minute I start making those types of predictions, they prove me wrong, right? And so we're working on that. Is that a fair answer?
Yes, we don't know.
Right.
You said they like shallow water. How deep?
You can find them in really deep stuff, right? So drainage ditches we've seen them in, but what they really like is that mucky substrate, right? When you go to, we all wear waders because we're not as good as Jim either at walking through the wetland, right? So the idea is they like that substrate maybe more so than depth, but right out here, when you're looking across those fins, those little areas that have probably this much water and this much mud, is oftentimes where you're gonna find them. Mm-hmm.
Is there any interest in taking information, you know, a lot of people here are walking around to different places and may spot. Is there any place that you'd be interested in getting that information?
You know what, I'm so glad you asked that question because it would have been a failure of me not to address it with that. So thank you for reminding me. Absolutely. You've got a phone in your pocket, right? And I don't know if y'all have heard of the iHerp atlas or the herp atlas that you can use on your phone. It's where some of the records that we now use are queried by a Division of Wildlife, right? But yes, my point is take a picture of it if you can, describe it to me if you can, but absolutely get that and get that to somebody at the office there, and absolutely, because here's what a neat little deal. Because we think those are like fingerprints. If I take a photo above of a spotted turtle, is there a computer algorithm that we could subject that image to that would then log that as an individual turtle? And so we're trying to maximize the stuff that we can do out of this, right? Because these fin habitats are quite precious. But yes, take that photo. If you're comfortable picking it up, turn it over on the bottom as well. Take an image of that as well.
Preferably a picture straight down.
There you go. So you can have it straight down from the turtle. This is a sort of a side image, right? But you can get, but anything. We call that a confirmed sighting, right? Even if we couldn't use it for analysis or that sort of thing. Because a lot of times you don't see the whole turtle, right? And sometimes you can zoom out with those things and catch them, right?
What was the name of that app you were talking
Herp Atlas. Herp Atlas. And I'll try to maybe get some follow-up through the association. Yes, ma'am. So the question was, what's the estimated population in the wetlands in this area? I have no idea. No idea. We've been studying one at a Clark County fin, and the situation's not great. We're in the teens, right? And something to be said for this is Ohio is rich in its herpetology field. Right? Roger Conant did a Reptiles of Ohio book 50, almost 90 years ago, right? And called in 1950 for the scientists quit trapping spotted turtles out of cedar bog, right? And so you can't swing a cat, that's inappropriate. There are lots of specimens in museums that were collected at Cedar Bog. And when you start talking about 94% survival, that means a population cannot handle losses of that nature, right? Now, they did what they did, and we know a ton of stuff about them, and I'm not bad-mouthing those who came before me. They provided critical information for us, absolutely tremendous information for us. But there's just sort of a different approach to that now, right? I don't know what got me started on that. Yes?
Have there been any efforts to reintroduce spotted turtles into the wild?
So there's a question about, have there been efforts to reintroduce spotted turtles into the wild? Yes. They had started them. Toledo Zoo has been doing some work with that. One of the reasons I think it could be important to find a healthy population of spotted turtles in southwestern Ohio may be, hey, look, we've got what looks to be beautiful habitat, right? Did they just get collected out of that, right? And the ability to reintroduce these things, it's there, yes. So there has been work on that. There has been good work on that says you want to keep them in captivity until they're 3 years old, because that survival rate, if you just dump them out there as soon as they're done hatching, it's not, that survival rate is not that great. Yes, sir.
A couple of years ago, I definitely saw a spotted turtle up in the Lost Nature Reserve, which is about a half a mile away from the wetland, and probably 80 feet elevation difference.
Really?
There is a little pond there, and there are at least intermittent streams which would flow from there down to the wetland.
I would love it.
Unusual.
I would love to see, I would love to have a record of that, right? And so this type of stuff is absolutely critical, because if we are gonna continue surveying for these things, it's great to know where we've seen them and where we haven't to make more sort of focused efforts. Yes, ma'am, in the back.
The Nate White, if I'm gonna turn one over,
Wait, are we recording this? Am I gonna be held up? Is there an attorney in the room? Well, in my experience, right, we try to be as pleasant as we can with them, but we're taking blood and we're injecting microchips, and they don't bite. They have not fallen. No. Yes, sir.
Knowing what their ecological place in
What about salmon?
is, what benefit are they in wetlands?
So the question is, what's their sort of ecological place? That's a good question, right? And unfortunately, we're not very good at figuring out what that is until it's removed, right? And so that's a dangerous game. I wish I could answer it, right? You're sort of swimming around this idea of a niche, right? The profession of an organism in its environment. And in graduate school, they would talk about it as being an n-dimensional hypervolume, which means it can just expand out and be anything. So everything's got a unique niche. But they are pretty good, right, indicators, right, which suggest that that may be a piece of their niche. In other words, for us to see these populations, right? Yeah, I just don't have a good answer for that. It felt like a defense. Any other questions?
Over there.
Oh,
Do you interface with iNaturalist? Because I do a whole bunch of, if I'm out and I saw one, I would take a picture with iNaturalist. Do you suck everything off of iNaturalist that you're, I spotted turtles within the demographics here, so that you would pull it?
that's a great question. The question was about iNaturalist, which is also a phone application that you can use. It's my understanding, I'm not the one that requests that on our team. Greg Phillips does it out of Ohio State. But I think he likes her atlas better because of the, it can mask a location, and they only release it to, Division of Wildlife. And there's settings that you can do in iNaturalist that won't share that sighting, but absolutely do it, right? Absolutely get a photo of that and upload it, even if you need to mask the location just a little bit. Yes, sir.
What else do you catch in your traps? You know, are there species that you trap that are indicative of a healthy family?
We will get leopard frogs. I like seeing leopard frogs. I like seeing pickerel frogs. We'll get pickerel frogs on occasion. We get a lot of fish, right, of various kinds. And then we've gotten a raccoon.
Very
And we,
irritated raccoon.
well, it was a young raccoon, right? And so the nets are $16, and I was just like, okay, we're just gonna cut this out. And water snakes. And what's interesting about water snakes and what we've learned about water snakes is that you just have to cut them out of the net. Because what happens is they'll get in there to get some type of prey. They eat the prey, it expands their circumference, and they can't get back out. But what does a water snake do when you grab it? Well, a lot of things. It'll musk you, it'll bite you, but they also twist. And so what'll happen is they get stuck in the net and they'll twist, and you've got to get in there. We check them every 24 hours, right? And so that's a reason why. Quite frankly, we don't really worry about the turtles in that 24-hour period. They're pretty relatively safe in there, but it's those non-targets. And so Nerodia, the water snake, is what we'll get in there that's sort of the most problematic.
Are there other turtle species that you trap?
We do, but you know, the habitat we've been trapping, like that photo you saw of the big turtle that we never caught, we really don't catch in those areas with these hoop traps that much because we get a lot of snapping turtles, right? Once you start getting out into that area, my thinking is that you're finding the larger turtles in those bigger waters because they can handle those big snapping turtles. We'll get oftentimes young snapping turtles in the same traps that we'll get spotted turtles in. Yes, sir.
What's the impact of knocking out beaver dams? Is that up and down bother their habitat?
So the question was about beaver dams. How do beaver dams impact things? They don't mind them. They really don't. Now, again, they like that shallower water that they're not going to compete with those bigger turtles with. But they love water. They love mucky substrate. And as long as they've got that, they're happy. I mean, as far as I know. All right. Yes, sir.
What's the range between the eastern population and the midwestern originally contiguous? And what's that like in historical times or like, pre-glacial or something like that?
I think it probably would have been, right? And then that split would have occurred. But if you notice, they don't cross over those Appalachians, right? So it would have been up in this area where you would have seen that probably occur. But we've got, part of this study is also a genetic piece. Now the problem is, a geneticist will probably want about 30 samples from each population, and we just don't. So whenever we're on our conference call and Mark's like, okay, I want 30 samples, everybody just looks at me. And I'm like, well, I don't know what we can do. Okay. Any other questions?
Could you talk about why you preferred a masculine location?
Sure. So one of the things is we don't talk about specific areas in our presentations, in our sort of events. Like, I'll report back on what we find, but it'll be y'all's decision on whether we talk about it being this fin or that fin or that thing. We just, in my opinion, the biggest threat to this species is that we love it too much, right? And it's cute and it's just one, right? But it can be devastating. So that's my concern. And so when we're having these traps out there, I'm always cognizant of where the public is in that park, right? Because a trapped turtle's a trapped turtle, right? And those are things that we have very honest conversations about, right? Because this is your resource, I'm just checking it out, right? Is that okay, Shannon? Okay. Any other questions? Yes, ma'am.
So when you trap them, then you mark them with a microchip, and then what is the
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, this is a radio transmitter.
yeah, and does that not get caught up in brush and stuff like that?
It doesn't. They're remarkably robust with that. And so what this is we're not going to attempt that here this year. We've got some ongoing radio telemetry studies in Clark County. But we have found turtles in fence rows between ag fields that are in active production. And so they move across the landscape much more than we think. And so here's and I gotta be honest with you, there's probably a cost to that turtle. And so it's my responsibility to make sure that the information we gain from that turtle, in my mind, right, and I know that that's not really a fair thing to say, but in my mind, the benefit we're getting from these data, I think, outweigh the harm that it's doing to the turtle. By the way, we've never lost a turtle on our trap watch, right? And that's something I take pride in.
What harm would it do?
it's just weight, right? And you'll notice that it's off to the side here. Why do you think we put it off to the side?
Mating.
They can mate still, right? Because if you put it on the top, right, the male wouldn't be able to mount the female. But yeah, this does sort of walk around. We found it with ice on the antenna before, right? Yes, sir.
What do they do in the winter?
So the question was, what do they do in the winter? They go into hibernation, we call it brumation, right? And so what it is they'll tunnel underneath the soil and just sort of hang out there, right? And we call them hibernacula, right? And they can breathe through their skin, right? There's a little bit of oxygen exchange through their skin. And y'all know that fins typically don't freeze solid, right? And so what you'll get is you'll get a thermocline that they really take advantage of. And there have been documented cases of up to 30 of these being in a single hibernacula. And what do you think that does to your fear for collection? If you've got 30 that are all right there, I mean, it's just... But this is uplifting, right? We're doing good things. We're trying to get stuff together, right? No. All right, any other questions? Y'all, thank you very much. It has been an absolute privilege.
Oh, but don't even worry. It's all good.
Let's just give Dr. Phillips another round of applause. Okay, I'm not working that hard. Well, thank you all so very much. This has been an incredible night, an incredible celebration, and we're so glad we got to share it with all of you. So thank you again, and have a wonderful evening.
This